And I went to Sedona on a trip to just have a little retreat and reset. And while I was there, I had something done that I don't mention the name of in the book. It's
I
called,
wondered why.
it's called Axia tonal alignment.
I wondered if you didn't name it in the book, if you were going to name it now. So now that this is reminding me of Lisa Renee.
Now, Lisa Renee, I am familiar with, but her stuff is so dense. It's like Seth material. It's so hard to get through.
It is denser than Seth. Are you kidding? I read Seth okay, and Lisa Renee, I'm like, what did I just read? But she talks about axiotonal. She uses that word a lot. This
Well,
isn't
it,
associated with her?
no, I mean, not that I know of. I don't know her, but so at the time it was just like it was advertised as like something that would line you up with your universal grid, like the higher grid. And I just kind of thought, oh, that sounds like a great thing. I want to be more like. Who wouldn't? So I went and I did this thing and it was two parts. And on the first day I started to notice the heat in my spine, and I was out in the world interacting with people. And like I said, this is an abridged version. There's so much more that went on
Sure.
in this story. I mean, there were other forces involved, but it continues to open up, by the way, in the quantum sense. That's how it works. It continues to unbox for me. But at the time I had what is considered, I guess, a textbook Kundalini um, awakening.
Hi, everyone. It's Candace Craw-Goldman again from quantumhealers.com. And today I'm welcoming back just such a wonderful person that I wish we talked more and more often. This is Jennifer Wertz, Jenn Wertz, quantum healer, a colleague and healer extraordinaire. Hi, Jenn.
Hi.
How are you today?
Well, it's cold here, but it's not as cold as where you are. I understand you guys have been in a deep freeze for longer than we have.
You know, typically winters, and I usually sort of get tired of it by February. And I don't know, there's just something about this winter that has gotten me cold to the inside of my bones.
Yes.
It's been really kind of difficult, the outside chores in particular. But yeah, my hands, I've got a heater down here. I'm in the basement like this a little right now. But yes, cold too. And it's really interesting. I had someone tell me just this morning that since having COVID, like they've been really extra cold, which I thought was really interesting,
Wow.
considering the blood component of both the jabs and the virus. So
Yeah,
I don't know.
it's been an interesting unfolding since 2020, hasn't it? All around.
Oh my gosh, like, oh my gosh, I know. There's some interesting things going on everywhere. One thing I'll mention sort of sideways, and of course I won't mention any names, but we had a post on the forum. It came in, I believe, yesterday morning, or possibly the day before, of a member who basically a longtime member reaching out for connection with other members for healing, for themselves, for a physical issue that they've been dealing with. And we had a response by just a wonderful, just she's one of my favorite people, and I can't quite get her to join me on any of these things. A wonderful practitioner named Heather Holm, and she had some real. Did you happen to read that post, Jenn?
I think that I saw the post, but I didn't see the response.
Yeah. So take some time to read Heather's response to it, because she kind of said something that I've been thinking about a lot, which is, in the work that we do, we often set ourselves separate from, of course, the traditional conventional approach to a lot of things, including medical issues, right? And she had a really wise take on it. And it's something that I've been thinking about for a long time, which is, we maybe shouldn't always push that completely away, because we're here to help raise the frequency and vibration of all. including the medical professionals that are in a more traditional, conventional setting, right? And that's just actually giving me goosebumps right now. I mean, we, at the start of or a good year into it, of the times of COVID. Boy, just think of all of the books and such that are going to be written about that. But we moved to a completely different health system, my husband and I. It's a concierge, which sounds really fancy, but it makes so much sense in this respect. They don't follow the standard construction of a medical practice. They set themselves outside of it, which gives them massive amounts of freedom. And the 10-minute doctor appointment is no more at the place where we go. And now the one thing is they don't accept insurance. But since we're self-employed, guess what?
Right.
Not much of that applies
Already.
anyway, right?
Yeah.
You're already screwed. But she has all of these freedoms, and our doctor, I've only been there maybe 3 times in the last 4 years. I mean, I have an hour with her in this beautiful office with, it's not cold, it's not clinical, it's like sitting down with a friend. There's all these extra things that are available if we want them, but we don't pay for them if we don't. But the attention to kind of a new way of looking, and she's completely open to our work, right?
Right.
And as a matter of fact, offers some of these services, dry needling and cupping and some different things like in the whole buffet of services there. And I mean, here in Wichita, Kansas, who knew?
Yeah. Yeah, Pittsburgh's a little barren like that, or it used to be, I guess. But I've always worked with applied kinesiologist chiropractic. So it's a naturopathic type of chiropractic. But that's never taken insurance anyway. So I'm like not really. But whenever we do have to go to the doctor, I can go in there with like big shields and ready to fight because we've had so many struggles. My son has had a lot of serious health issues since he was a baby. So I really have to like read up and be ready to stand my ground all the time. And but I would say this, the great thing that I'm experiencing is a lot of clients that are coming through for quantum healing, for awakening, are medical people. And they are questioning I guess the profession, the direction of the profession. They're feeling like they're not healing people. They're feeling like they need to. And so there's a lot of time being spent. Like, are you going to be part of a new wave of workers? Are you moving into a new space, or are you moving out of this space entirely?
We're not in an easy place. We're on that cusp, right? So it's always, what's the easiest thing? The easiest thing is to default to what everyone else is still doing and the still conventional, still accepted. But that's typically not us, is it?
No, it never was, even before any of this crazy life started. But
yeah. Well, what I have found is, there's always been a component of like the nursing profession that has been interested in quantum healing, but I'm always fascinated when a doctor shows up, and I've had a number of those over the years, and yes, more since 2020, because so many of them are questioning. And you're right about questioning, and what I find and what I think is particularly interesting, they're questioning their education, of course, because they're finally going, oh, let's see who sponsors these schools and gives them the most money. I mean, look it up, people. Look up who funds these giant big systems. And then some of it starts to make sense when you plug in human nature and kind of, how about history?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, hopefully it's on the whole new wave. The whole new wave is going to be in the medical as well.
Yeah. Well, we really weren't going to talk about any of that today. Not really, but we always talk about what's kind of on our mind. We're going to talk once again. I just finished talking to Cilla Lewis about her chapter in this book. So many quantum healers in this book. And I reread your chapter last night. I think it programmed my dreams. It was really, really good. Did you know when you were going to write your chapter in Awakening Stories, did you know exactly what you were going to, or did you have to ponder for a while? And why
No.
don't you give us a little synopsis of your chapter?
So my chapter is a very, very, very abridged version of a very long story. So my awakening is still underway, as many of us hopefully still feel that way. It's not an arrival kind of thing. It's an evolving thing. So, but back in 1996, I was in a state of transition. I was leaving my band for the first time. I had left my band twice, and we were a popular band. We were traveling around, playing at stadiums and outdoor arenas and things like that. And we had a music video and all that kind of stuff. So I was living a really different life, but I had like books by Barbara Masiniak, and so I was aware that there was something coming, but I also had some contact when I was a teenager and even before. So but to me, I was in that realm of like not parlor games, but isn't it wild how if I think of somebody, they call me? And I thought it was so neat and weird. And then, it sort of just stayed that way for a long time. I worked with crystals some, I had some Reiki done, but I wasn't practicing anything except for the law of attraction. I mean, I was really into that. And I went to Sedona on a trip to just have a little retreat and reset. And while I was there, I had something done that I don't mention the name of in the book.
I wondered why.
It's called Axia tonal alignment.
I wondered if you didn't name it in the book, if you were going to name it now. So now that this is reminding me of Lisa Renee.
Now, Lisa Renee, I am familiar with, but her stuff is so dense. It's like Seth material. It's so hard to get.
It is denser than Seth. Are you kidding? I read Seth okay, and Lisa Renee, I'm like, what did I just read? But she talks about axiotonal. She uses that word a lot. This is associated with her?
No, I mean, not that I know of. I don't know her, but so at the time, it was just like it was advertised as like something that would line you up with your universal grid, like the higher grid. And I just kind of thought, oh, that sounds like a great thing. I want to be more aligned. Who wouldn't? So I went and I did this thing, and it was 2 parts. And on the first day, I started to notice the heat in my spine, and I was out in the world interacting with people. And like I said, this is an abridged version. There's so much more that went on. Sure. In this story. I mean, there were other forces involved, but it continues to open up, by the way, in the quantum sense. That's how it works. It continues to unbox for me. But at the time, I had what is considered, I guess, a textbook Kundalini awakening, a spontaneous one. So that is something that people do. They do yoga, certain types of meditation. They do certain things to awaken this fire energy at the base of your spine. And then it is to move up through your chakra systems and awaken your third eye. Now, that is something that I didn't understand any of that, and I had no concept for it. And I didn't know that's what was happening to me for well into 6 months after the experience.
Did you and I know you're still talking about this, so I'm, but if you don't mind me asking you questions throughout it, when you were having the sort of the more immediate reactions of the day or the next day or a couple days after, did you contact the practitioner?
I sure did. I tried to reach her, and she went hands off. She was so scared and so freaked out. She said,
"Isn't that interesting?
Anything like this, people sometimes have a lift in their energy, but I've never seen anybody like lose their mind or be paranoid or scared. And she immediately kind of what would be the equivalent now of blocking me on her phone. So she stopped. Then what I also don't mention is within the year following, I did contact the originator of that modality. And she was in San Francisco, and she did give me quite a lot of her time. And she
fantastic. And was
to,
that supportive? And what did you learn, if anything?
Well, what she said to me was she was the first one who said, I think it sparked a Kundalini awakening for you.
So she just named it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, and she was like, well, it's something that people strive to do, but it can take a whole lifetime or lifetimes to get there. And it's just, and then in the book, I talk about going to see a renowned energy healer who, I won't say his name, but he was the leader of the ayahuasca church in the United States. So he was facilitating medicine journeys back in the 90s. He brought it from Brazil and was the head of the church there in Ashland, Oregon, near Shasta. And he heard through a friend of a friend that I had been experiencing this and what happened. And he was going to be on the East Coast and invited me where he would be teaching a number of practitioners how to manage the energy body. And he invited me as a test subject, and he said, when I walked into that room where he was holding his seminar in Maryland at a retreat center, I walked in and I'd been panicking the whole drive. I was so scared to be in the car. I was still in full panic every day, all day, cascading panic attacks.
That's so uncomfortable.
Oh, it was horrifying. And like I said in the book, it's also there was paranoia. So I've learned so much about panic and how that whole thing works. But, when I walked into the room and he was there, and he had two colleagues with him and they were sort of ready to work. And so they were in their embodied state and they had their fields really wide. Of course, at that time, I had no idea what any of these things meant. But I walked in and all I know is when I walked into the room, the panic left my body. And I looked at him and said, oh my God, how'd you do that? And he said, I'm grounding you. And I was like, and he said, so there's like a surge of electricity. It would be like that you're blowing a fuse. And so you have to ground the energy, and you skipped out of town. You left your body and your body's going like a garden hose. It's just like flying around like this, flailing. And so that was the first thing that they sort of taught me about. But I continued to travel to see them for some time, and they taught me all about those things. But
so you left there in a much better state.
I left there with confidence and understanding that I could control. And he also told me, like, I know 100% that you know how to do this. This is a Kundalini. He said, that's a spontaneous Kundalini awakening. It's incredible that you didn't lose your mind. People lose their minds. They go all the way gone. And I thought that I had, but then by that time I had started receiving the instruction as well. And so it was a very twofold experience for me all along. I was terrified, and I was also resentful and bitter. And also my mind was searching for answers. I was ruminating. I wanted to know where this came from, who did it, what, was there somebody who did it? Was it somebody in Sedona that I encountered that had like interfered? Was it alien energy? Because there was more that went on in that hotel room than just seeing that tunnel. I saw a tunnel of light, but there was other things happening there that were, other out there. That's for a longer book. It's really a long story, but, he just kind of taught me, as I stood in a room. I'm sorry.
I've got a cat. Okay. Who's trying to be a part of this.
I couldn't
right behind the computer. No. I'm like, please go away. Pardon us.
But
it's right by your side of the screen. I think he likes your energy.
He likes maybe my story.
Yes.
so what that looked like at the time was that I stood in the center of the room and all of these energy workers, and I had my eyes closed, and there were about 15 of them in this very large room. And he told me, you're going to stand there. I want you to tell me when energy's coming or going. Then I want you to assign a color to it. Then I want you to assign a temperature to it. And I did that, and it was incredible that I was correct. My eyes were closed, and I would say, there's somebody at right here from about 5 feet back that's trying to pour some blue, cold energy into the base of my neck. And that was true. And so then he was like, see, you know, so let's start speaking that language. And that was just the beginning where, and then they were explaining to me how the energy works, which is what the team showed me, which is that people hold trauma in the outer part of their field. And when you walk by, you're going to pick it up like a radio station. If you have that frequency in you, either you can correct it or you have experienced it and therefore can correct it or help somehow. Or it's just poking you. You know, it's just poking yours. And so I was seeing, I was just having like psychic barrage. And what I learned about panic is in the same way that we are tripped into in a car accident and your blood goes up and your whole adrenaline, and that lasts for a few minutes, tingles, nerves, you see a little bit of confusion, and then it calms down because you say, I'm in a car. I nearly got into an accident, right? But when this is happening from a psychic level, it's happening energetically. There is no incident to assign that adrenaline to. And so your mind is going crazy, searching for the assignment. And that leads to the paranoid thinking. What is this? What is this? And it's crawling up your spine and you feel it. And so it was terrifying for a long time. And then I started to get those very, very intense lessons and downloads from what I called at the time my 415 team, because every morning when I woke up, the clock said 415.
Gosh, I've heard 315 all the time. You're my first 415. Maybe that's because you're on the East Coast.
Yeah, maybe.
It's an hour earlier here in Kansas.
Correct.
Wow, how interesting is that? Yeah, I've noticed 315 for my whole life. Wow. Yes, and just think of, gosh, I'm thinking so many things while you're telling me this. Think of how many people are in institutions who have had similar things, and the only thing people are doing to help them is to just medicate the crap out of them and warehouse them.
Yeah. Well, the fascinating part about that is I have a family member, one of my siblings is paranoid schizophrenic, and he is about as bad as that disease gets. And it's a clinical issue, but I mean, gosh, in around 1990, when I started having some trauma from my childhood come up, he was picking it up. He would call me and say that he was dreaming about it, or he saw something outside of his window and he was describing what I was remembering. And I always thought, I wondered if he was touched, psychic. Unfortunately, he is really, it's not a workable. I've thought, can I work with him in terms of quantum healing? I'm close to approach that because I get so sensitive around him. He's, but so I have some clients who come in and, we ask the clients if they have any history of mental illness for a reason, because we're going to be going into a territory. And I've been thinking so much about this recently. That's wild, the mental illness thing, because I have had the question come up recently. Am I shutting people out that I have keys to offer something to? And I'm not necessarily, I don't feel like I'm equipped to work with a schizophrenic. I can work with people with psychotic features, but not the extremity so far. But I've been asking myself that question. It's just sort of coming up a little bit.
That's been coming up in our forum all the way back into the days of Dolores. And Dolores was just like, nope,
Yeah.
nope, 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 all the way, nope. And then there was a great big river of people who didn't like that answer. And um, then it became, well, what kind of diagnosis? And then who's doing the diagnosing? And um, I've had experiences over the years where here's one. I've mentioned this in other contexts before, but I had a woman, this was a number of years ago, long before even Dolores died. I did a session with a woman who called me up and she said I wanted a past life regression. And remember, that's what it was called for the longest time. And so I'm talking to her and she goes, but let me tell you, she says, I've been trying to have one for a very long time, but no one will book me in because I spent time in a mental institution. I had electroshock therapy. I've been diagnosed schizophrenic. So I'm talking to her. And you know what? I mean, on the phone, I'm talking to her and I'm like, well, I know she doesn't sound schizophrenic right now. I've talked to people who have that diagnosis or who have experienced that in their lives. And I just asked her a couple of questions. I was like, well, when did all this happen? And she said, oh, 15 years ago. And I'm like, well, can you just tell me your story a little bit right now on the phone? She said, yeah. She said, so I was, I don't know, dreaming or waking up or something. She had a visitation by light beings and she, angelic beings. And they spoke with her. And the first thing, and she'd never had anything like this happen to her before. And she immediately told her husband. She also immediately went to her doctor immediately. And that began this cascade of things that ended up putting her in a mental institution, electroshock therapy, and on medication and all of that stuff. And as she's talking, I'm thinking, I know of all kinds of people who've had that
How far?
experience
That's
right
like
there.
most of my friends in this realm now.
Exactly,
God, call
exactly.
me
And
in the
right. And then I asked a couple questions after that. And, she's like, that was 15 years ago. And then this, and then I got out after, I don't know, a couple of years. And then I got off my medication. And so it's been like 15 years. I'm like, okay, so can you tell me a little bit about your life since then? She's like, yeah, I'm not on any medication. I've had this. It was like a bookkeeper or an accounting job. I've had that same job for 15 years. Are you married? Yep. You have a stable family life? Yeah. I'm like, I don't think I'm no doctor.
yeah.
I don't think you were ever schizophrenic. I just don't think so. We could try. I said, let me tell you what. I said, come on in. We'll do a session. I won't promise you anything. Let's come here. You talk more. If something, my context was so different back then too. I hadn't had as many years of doing this work. And there was all kinds of no. She was diagnosed as that. So always no. And everybody was saying no to her. And she came and I was just like, I just couldn't see anything other than, and I was using my intuition, of course, my huge intuition, also knowing, and I say this even in my story in this book, when I was having I couldn't make them stop happening out of body experiences. I
Right.
hid that from my husband because I thought he would help me into a straitjacket, just like her husband did,
Yes.
you know? And I had the most fantastic session with her. Absolute volumes of information to help her, tears of gratitude, just putting the whole thing into context. And it was a spectacular session.
I wonder if one of the fears that Dolores had, or maybe she had encounters with this, you might have some insight, is the paranoia aspect. Is that when people, and we're talking about, but this is relevant to the story because I did go see a psychiatrist. I was the opposite. I was desperate to be diagnosed with. Honest to God, I would thought if you just tell me I'm having a psychotic break, this will all make sense and I will be able to deal with that and work with that. But what I'm experiencing it was so out there. And luckily I got one that said, I'm sorry, but I think you're not having a break with reality. You're getting a bigger dose of it. and you're going to have to redefine your normal.
There, how many out there would be able to even mouth those words in that way?
I mean,
You're really lucky, I
I,
think.
I mean, so I felt lucky. I felt lucky because I had brought two friends with me, and they told me how lucky I was, and they were like, "Geez, wow, she really got what you were saying." But I mean, they could have really doped me up, and but I wondered if what Dolores encountered was the paranoia factor, where people who are in a psychotic break are doing that searching for what is causing this feeling of attack or this, and you can become a part of their story. And if that's a, we've encountered that in my loved one with mental illness, and it is no picnic and it is no joke when somebody has focused their delusion onto you. And so that is my biggest hesitancy in working with people with
Sure.
mental
Sure. Well, I had two, count them two for sure. Uh, Women, they were both women, they were both nurses. They both knew how to hide their
illness. Oh,
schizophrenia from me and got in anyway.
wow.
One was in my very first year of working, and I should have, I was still in this weird place of, I wasn't a therapist, I wasn't a counselor, I wasn't any of those things. I was an artist photographer. I didn't have the background, the experience to, or even the guts, I guess. And I was still in my, I'm really nice. I'm nice.
You're very nice. You are.
I'm nice, and I should have shown this woman the door. I should have shown this woman the door, and I actually didn't. This one first one, there was actually another quantum healer with me, and part of the reason I didn't was she was a little bit more experienced, but just as nice, and I mean, the whole thing was kind of ridiculous. But my first clue should have been Jenn when we asked, like, well, did you bring your questions? And she like lifted up this notebook and I'm looking at them, and she had them numbered, and there was 350 of them.
Oh boy. Yeah.
She was all over the map, and we still did the session, which I should have seen 350 questions and shut it down right there. But looking back on it, actually, Dolores is laughing right now. She goes, "But then you wouldn't be able to be talking about it now, would you?" So yeah. So we did the session, and it was just, it's just like, imagine a whole bunch of sessions in a blender is all it was. I mean, it was incomprehensible. There was no way to follow anything. The whole thing was crazy. She knew how to hide all of her things, and she was just very, anyway, it was no fun. I've had another woman come who did the same thing, also a nurse. And
Wow.
here's the crazy part. Here's the crazy part. She got all the way through her session, and I'm just turning off the recording because she's coming up out of it, right? It was an in-person session. And I still can't believe how lucky I was. It was a fine session, and she was on medication, but she definitely, I didn't find this out till she was in the room, and I learned about it. But when it was all over and I had already stopped the recording, as she was coming out of it, she absolutely had an outburst. It was the first of the whole thing. So putting her into trance, she actually had a reasonable session, but coming back out of it, it's crazy too. I'm like, digital recorder, turn off. Then the outburst happens. And then she was still kind of weirdly in trance. And she almost like didn't know she had this outburst. And I didn't talk about it. Like, I just left it there. And it wasn't until like 2 weeks later, and I sent her the recording and everything. She goes, I had this weird memory that the beings or the things were that they came back, or whatever. But I guess I just like, I don't know. It wasn't on the recording, so I guess it just didn't happen. And I actually didn't respond really. I just kind of, you know,
Yeah.
I didn't want to get into it with her. I didn't want to see her again. She did have some benefit, but that outburst, I don't want to do that again. And I
Yeah.
don't want to do the other one. I'm just not interested. So I think there may be some who are being helped by medicine or have gone past it or whatever who could. I'm not interested in being in that space of trying that anymore.
Yeah. I don't feel confident enough to address that, but also there's an odd thing where like I look back on what I was going through. I would have seemed, and definitely did seem, like I was losing my mind to the people in my life. A lot of people moved away, moved back, away
Can
from.
you can you describe what they were feeling, or were you saying, or was it just that you were being parent? I mean, what were you outwardly
I
expressing for them to think that?
I mean, when I left on a plane, I left a band rehearsal. I was gregarious and happy, and everything was great. I said, I'm going to Sedona. I'll see you guys mid-February. And I left. And when I came back early. My boyfriend was just a ball of love and so supportive. And I couldn't look people in the eye for very long. I would get so overwhelmed with their energy. And so I was like, and so if anybody touched me, I would feel like waves, 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 and then they would stop, and then would come an internal wave of a panic attack. So it was so much information.
Wow.
I can see it visually now. It would be like it was very psychedelic looking, because when I had the first awakening, I saw things in grids and lines, and sometimes things would drop away, and it was almost like a computer imagery of grids that make up the plants, and everything had a charge and a tone. And so I was at first up on the mesa at my hotel room, and it was like falling nighttime, and the night air had like a personality and was making a tone, and I felt like it was pressing down on me. And then the plants over here were kind of talking, and I was like, oh my God, everything is alive, everything is alive, everything is alive. And then in my story, I recount how there were times where I would just get overwhelmed by this ecstatic, almost orgasmic lift, where I thought I was going to float the whole way out of my body. And there would be a little bit of nausea right before that happened. And it was a true blue clinical Kundalini awakening.
Yeah, it was. Wow.
not,
Wow.
uh, not joyful at first. But then when I started to have the contact, at first I was like, okay, I'll watch your movies. And they were showing me their movies. And I was like, this is cool. This is psychedelic. I don't know what this was. It was all coded light language in the first couple of times. And then they started showing me these visceral movies of the spectrum of victim and perpetrator, how those play out, and all the positions that we play on that it's spherical and it turns inside out, so that we are both victim and perpetrator encountering one another in different bodies. And at that time, I was like, cool. Thanks for the information. Just think about it now. It's 2024, 25. You can log on to TikTok, Instagram, anything, and there's any number of 100,000 people saying, your energy body will do this. And we are victim and they're all talking about it. This was 1996. There was nobody talking about it. I had to go find the books. I had to go find the people. And the ones that knew what I was talking, what level I was talking about the encounter, when I would describe it, they knew. Like, it was like people would click in and go, oh my God, you're walking right on the edge of the veil. And then, of course, long story short, I couldn't hack it. After a while, I was like, I don't like this. Every single thing encounter that I have has a charge, and it would overwhelm me quite a lot. So a movie, I couldn't go to movies. I just stopped eating animals, which is fine. But at that time, I liked eating animals, so I stopped eating animals because eating the animals would have an encounter. So it was like talking to the plants I was going to eat. It was like all of this stuff, and so the people in my life were like, "Wow, like." What happened to you? And to try to explain to somebody that, I mean, it was just like, I just say I had an encounter that has caused me to feel unstable quite a lot. And I'm having to, I told them what my doctor said. And what my doctor said was, it's going to take some time for you to digest these experiences. And while you do, we're going to give you some, they gave me Zoloft and said, this is going to create a container within which you can experience these encounters and digest them without like getting too tripped off by the physiological response. And that did work, but it never went quite away until I consciously came back. I went back to sleep. I said, I can't. And I used a lot of substance buffering. So I used cigarettes, alcohol, I tried pot, but pot kind of made it worse. Pot's the other direction.
Right? Especially these days. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow.
Sex, people went back out on tour with the band, and all of those things made it so that I could function. And I did that for 20 years. And then 2020, they just came back. And there was
mid-sentence.
Yes,
I
they
love
did.
it.
As a matter of fact, yeah, it was
As we were saying,
Yeah.
I laughed out loud when I got to that part. Jenn, Jenn, what I have not experienced the intensity of what you've experienced. I still have a cat who's trying to get involved in this. Just, I don't know why you're gonna.
I'm quite a cat person.
I have this lighting kind of like poised here, and he's about gonna mess me up, but we'll see. I had this thing happen once, which was really interesting. Like when you're talking about all the information and whatever. It was 1986. I absolutely know when it was. I was sitting, and this was during the time I was having the out-of-body experiences that I couldn't keep from happening.
Yeah.
I would lay down to go to sleep, and off I would go again, and I had no idea what was happening to me. And I talk about that in my Awakenings chapter as well. But there was this time in the middle of the day, and I'm headed towards art school, painting school, in North Carolina, and I'm just at a stop sign. And it's a side road, and I'm waiting for a bunch of cars and trucks on the highway. I'm just waiting to merge in. And right next to my vehicle, a little red pickup at the time, was a row of mailboxes that are very typical in a lot of rural places in America. They're like a row of old-fashioned mailboxes on one pole, and I just was waiting for traffic, and all of a sudden one of these mailboxes, like this whole thing happened right in my space. As I looked at this mailbox, like a part of the mailbox, just the tin, or whatever that it was made out of, like this whole thing happened, and I saw this man making these mailboxes, and I saw a drop of his sweat come off of his forehead onto the metal, and I saw and smelled the lunch his wife made him that was in this whole thing, just like it just went wah. This whole like thing was like I'm sitting at, and I was fascinated, but I was also a little overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
So some of that has come to me like in those kind of things during that time of these out-of-body experiences. But I was in a bit of a panic too. I didn't know if I was dying, and I didn't tell anyone.
Well, you were quite young, and your first one, you were quite young.
In my 20s, the mid-20s.
Well, the 11-year-old one.
Oh yeah, that one. Yeah. Oh yeah, I didn't tell anyone about it.
Yeah.
Except for my brother. He knew, and we had some things, but I had I thought I was dying then with this out of body experience. But the part where I couldn't even, I mean, I was exhausted. I was going to college. I was trying to sleep and I couldn't sleep without leaving my body. And I couldn't stop it. And the vibrations
Mhm.
and this whole thing of this up and down, and it just took my whole body. But see, I didn't feel that when I was 11. When I was 11, I was just like, I want to go see if my brother won that spelling. I mean, I just felt like I was walking. I didn't know I was out of body till all of a sudden my head went like this on the ceiling. Doink, doink. And that's still really interesting too, because that, of course, was my astral and my energy body, but I felt the ceiling with it.
Right.
I,
And
I
then you,
touched it,
you talk about reading the Robert Monroe Journeys Out of,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, what a context that gives you.
Yeah.
Um, that guy that's a gold mine of a book for people encountering what you're encountering. Cause I had that, I was prone to the floating out. It was only at bedtime, only at night, only in dreams. But boy, I would struggle and scream and kick trying to get back into my body until I read that book.
Exactly. He
And then
saved my life.
holy shit, I
He
have
saved my life.
I have agency in that space. I'm
Yeah,
claiming my space in that space. It was a life changer.
it really truly was. That's when I finally could talk about it with my husband. After I read those books, I sort of told him a little bit about some of this stuff. And yeah, it was great. It changed everything. I just happened to see, I only saw the first few minutes of this, but it was so great. It was so great. It was a Joe Rogan interviewing Tom Campbell, who you
Uh,
may have heard of before. And the really fascinating thing, I actually thought about you. I thought about this this meeting that we were going to have, and also, sorry, I'm getting a thing I had to dismiss on my computer. Um, what we were going to talk about in our chapters and what you wrote in there. And within the first like 5 or 10 minutes of his introduction of what his work's all about, he talked about the grids, the information, seeing all of that just in meditation,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And then he talked about Robert Monroe, like within the first, and he was like, this is the beginnings of his whole, he calls it his big toe, his theory of everything. And that, of course, is that consciousness is in absolutely everything. And it's like what you said, the night air has a consciousness, the plants have a consciousness, that mailbox had a story, and the square inch that caught my eye that was glinting off of the sun with the sweat of the man who was, I mean,
I mean, you zoomed into a dimensional reality that for some reason you were aligning with on a frequency level with that person that made that.
yeah.
So that's a lot of the journey that I've done since 2020 that is very matter of fact to me now. But it would not be possible to be matter of fact to me if I hadn't had that earlier experience.
Yeah.
And I believe that people like you and I are creating the platform. There are millions of us everywhere in the world that are creating the platform for other people to onboard into this newer, wider bandwidth of
Yeah.
reality. But for those of us who were, getting these experiences early on, and think about the people even way before us.
Oh, of course.
Holy
They
Moses!
got they got stones tied to them and thrown in ponds.
That's correct. They had their throats cut, and they had
Sure.
their eyes cut out because they saw things or knew
Yeah.
things. Or
Sure.
I mean, and the truth is, it's easier for people, I think, to see the things now. Back then, I used to say to this guy from the ayahuasca church, people drink a tea and they do this on purpose. And yeah, they vomit, and we sit there and facilitate them, and they see the truth of everything, and they're on the ride of the plant medicine. Then they get off that ride, and they have an expanded consciousness. And I think to myself, why would anybody in their right mind ever do that on purpose? But I think now we don't have to do so much to achieve this.
Right.
It's happening. We're having the birth canal is in It's dilating.
Would you ever do ayahuasca now? I wouldn't in a million years.
Oh my God.
Not
No.
a million years. I'm
I mean,
like,
I'm here.
it happens anyway. Why do I need
No,
to
yeah,
happen?
no, we don't need it. And the thing is, like, I have people come who have done the plant journeys.
Yeah.
It's actually in my, for awakening consults that I do, which by the way, I'm getting more and more calls for every week. All kinds of people. And the question is, I'm not really sure why I called you, but what is happening? What is happening?
I know I typically laugh and I go, well, you're in the right place.
Yeah, you called the right person. But a lot of them have either are about to go on a plant medicine journey,
Right.
looking into it, or they just did one and they can't sort of get back in the driver's seat because they got on the plant ride. They're riding the consciousness of that medicine. It sort of bonds with your consciousness grid wise. You go onto their grid, but you're not really like sort of in the driver's seat unless you go into it with this consciousness of that. So I get some clients coming here to go into a session and we take them and put them into the driver's seat and play out some of the scenes they had in their plant journey that they can't shake. Some of them can be kind of scary.
Sure. Well, that's great to have someone to go with you when you do that.
Yeah.
So, like when you talk about this idea of not needing ayahuasca, instantly it makes me think, and I want to spend the last little bit of time that we have together talking about the same reason why, don't you think? Because I feel this way. So a lot of people still think they need this really deep trance. And they need to absolutely not only a trance state, but a deep trance state where they don't remember anything to actually get anything significant or valuable out of any kind of quantum healing session. But Quantum Connect is helping to change that. And I really feel like you are on the very front edge of some of the most valuable and unique ways. And, you've adapted it to your practice in such a beautiful way, and your clients don't need to lay down, spend 3 hours and go into trance. So tell us a little bit about how you are using Quantum Connect in your practice.
I love it. It's my favorite thing to practice. It's also my introductory thing when people call me and say, what do you think I should do? I think that one of the more valuable things is it's offering a roadmap. I'm creating a platform in a slightly expanded state of consciousness. And so whenever I work with clients, we ground and we shield. Every session, we state our intention and we do a heart coherence. And then I just guide them through breathing to engage their 4 elemental bodies. We're increasing the bandwidth of that central channel. That now moment is getting wider and wider. And then I just start asking them questions and we guide them on that journey. The things that you have set forth with the healing flower that comes from your planet, the right and the left side, this is your feminine, your masculine. We get a map. We get a sense of how they are. This is their dream language, their super consciousness language. They know what color that flower is and what chakra that is going to. I say, how do you get the healing from that flower? And they say, well, I roll around in it. And then this one says, I breathe it in. And then this one says, I wring it out and take a bath in the, and then we go into the garden and we incorporate that color into the water,
Yes.
And then
it just builds and builds and builds, and nobody has to search for anything. It's all just right there when they just talk. All they have to do is talk.
It's so easy, and they always are surprised at how easy the answers come to them. But also, when I started working with it, one of my test subjects was myself. And I was in a meditation and I started doing the questions and the answers were coming in and it just started to unfold. And I went into a whole younger version of myself and found a number of myselves that were trapped in certain places. And so that's become one of the big things that I do in there is we find a guide. The benevolent guide is there. And the benevolent guide is sort of stewarding the garden. And then we work with an animal guide that's going to lead them into sort of a backyard area or a backstage area. Some people innately go down a ramp. So they're going into, sort of a deeper consciousness, subconscious space, and they will often find um, a wounded animal, a version of themselves. I say, are they happy, content, nervous, anxious? And they'll say what they are. And we communicate to this younger self who we are, tell them a little bit about our life now. And then I always say the weirdest thing to clients, and I tell them beforehand, I might say some weird stuff, but it's important. And I tell them to tell their younger self that they can drive a car, that they can leave difficult situations. And you do. That you couldn't then, but you do now. Do they understand? And they'll be like, yes. And it's the weirdest bridge that you'd think that people have made, but people don't know how to bridge those younger selves with these, now parts that have grown up in consciousness and brought them into a session that led them here, to do this healing work. So we ask them if they want to come out, and we take them out, and the guide takes care of them. The guide either bathes them in the water, and they start to grow up in consciousness, and then we'll come back for a second session and check in. How are they doing there in your garden? How have they grown? Some of them are like, they grew into a full-grown woman. They're like a dragonfly. They're, and we ask them to come and sort of, become a part of our consciousness now, because now we're trustworthy. Now there's a container, right? And people will say, like, I've been 2 years with my therapist, just going over and over shit, and we never got to any of this. We got so much done in this one session.
Right.
And talk therapy just isn't, because we're not examining the trauma. We are not asking that child what happened. We don't have to assign blame. We don't have to wallow in the victimhood. We have to create a container for them to exit now safely. And so
what I think about a lot? I think about this a lot because I'm outside a lot in my life and in my world. And there are places on our farm where the deer walk. They're deer trails. But there's other kinds of trails. Like there's pack rat trails, and there's even little mice trails, and they're always in the same place. And they're always in the same place because all of them go on the trail over and over again, and the vegetation tends not to grow on something that is used so much. And when I see these trails, I think about the looping thoughts in people's mind and the whole idea of talk therapy. They go there and they walk those trails again and again and again and again and again and again. They're just, it's like, ugh.
Yeah. It's an identity that people can get attached to that keeps them. It actually becomes, the way that I see it energetically, is they just have like a fur coat on between them and feeling. And the fur coat is like, oh, poor me. This happened to me. It's terrible. Yes, of course. And we have to acknowledge that. But there's like the color and the smell and the taste of that moment to breathe in and breathe out. But the person has to be willing to take the coat off,
And look, for those of you who might say talk therapy helped you, look, you have to start by acknowledging what happened to you. And yes, that includes talking that. It's the 20 years of going to the one person and talking about the same thing over and over again that we're talking about here. That's sort of the thing. So, wow.
Yeah. I wouldn't replace it. I would say it's a compliment.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Gosh, well, and I think one of and we're running up on my next appointment, so I'm going to have to let you go here shortly, but I think the thing that is the best compliment to me about Quantum Connect is whether or not some of the realizations or breakthroughs are really, really big and significant, or if they're just little, or if they're just exciting, and they're more of a possibility than a breakthrough, but a possibility that's been handed to them or whatever. My favorite thing about this approach, absolute favorite thing, is I didn't know this could be fun. This was fun.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we know it can be big, and we know it can be healing, and know it can provide answers, and we know it can be profound and all of that. But my favorite part is like, well, but that was fun.
Yeah, and sometimes that's SE coming in and making it funny and bringing them imagery that makes us all giggle, makes us giggle in the room because we're like, oh, what, there's peanut butter and jelly sandwich right there. Gosh, I mean, and it's a symbol to them of comfort, and
Sure.
they don't even know or remember that, but they say for some reason there's a peanut butter and jelly sandwich there in a bag and I'm supposed to take it with me. And that's
Yeah,
funny. I mean, come on, it's a hilarious image. And that comes
it
from
is.
their subconscious and their higher self that's trying to help them, release these things and not just keep swimming in
Yeah,
it.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, we must do this again, for sure, and talk more because you're one of my favorite people to talk to.
You know what? I wanted to hear more about how you ended up after all of this getting to Dolores because you touch on it in your story, but
Oh, I will do that.
I
What
would.
do you mean? How I ended up getting to Dolores?
Yeah, like so in your story you talked about your out of body experiences and your brother,
Yeah, yeah,
and all of that, and then like of course you open your story with your caveman experience with
yeah, yeah.
working with us. But I'm curious just to learn more about your journey to working with her.
Well, I will tell you this, and I told the story with actually images and all of this back in November at the International Mandela Effect Conference, and my story will be available online. They have yet to. They've been putting them out, the presentations, bit by bit as they're edited, etc. So it's not quite out yet, but if it was, I would point you straight to that, or anyone who's listening straight to that. It was me being dark night of the soul kind of thing, but it was simply because of pain and my body that wasn't responding to absolutely anything, and I had to cancel. My interaction with the music world happened in Austin as a photographer for country and western singers, and the horse world and the rodeo world, they were all kind of together. And I was doing and had produced a number of album covers for some bands down there and singers. And I had set up what for me was one of the biggest shoots of my life with lights and a crew, and I had a set, not inside but outside, with this really cool old car, and it took like months to drill down to make this happen. And I thought my biggest issue was going to be the weather, but my biggest issue was in fact that I woke up that morning and I couldn't move because I was in such severe pain.
Wow.
And I had to pick up my phone and cancel everything. And I felt like a loser. It really was. It was a huge moment for me. And I had been living with the chronic pain for so long, and I'd have good days and I'd have bad days and all that. But this was just, it was mortifying to me that I had to let so many people down for this event. And I uh, decided to basically do a marathon prayer. And my prayer changed words. I'd kind of always prayed in sort of these thoughts and feelings and words of, my God, somebody help me. It was something in that, like assistance. And that day, for whatever reason, my prayer turned to something completely different. And it was, I've done everything I know to do. What am I supposed to do? Just what am I supposed to do with it? What am I supposed to do? I basically prayed that for hours, prayed myself into an out-of-body experience, was standing in a field with what I now know is, my light council, my helpers. And the center one, it was 5. Center one actually handed me a piece of paper, like with a Sharpie marker list on it, and it said 1, 2, 3, and I was told exactly what to do. I finally asked the right question, got the right, and one was go to your doctor, tell him you're tired. I wasn't tired, so I'm like, huh? Number 2 was volunteer for that organization that I still volunteer for. Now I lay me down to sleep. We provide infant bereavement remembrance photography for mothers and families who lose babies at birth, or who are born still or shortly after birth while they're in the hospital. I had 2 big high-risk pregnancies that were successful, but I could have easily gone the other way. And number 3 was have a past life regression. And as amazing as that entire experience was, which was a profound, it wasn't really as fantastic as the very next day. Because the very next day, every one of those things, it was like, I literally was looking around as if a movie crew was following me. I felt like I was in a movie. The way everything on that list came. My doctor didn't take appointments, and I'm like, well, I'll get on his long list. And he was like, well, we have a cancellation in 2 hours. Can you come? And this whole thing. And when I'm there, I'm like, what am I going to tell him? And then I told him. And then I thought, he's going to think I'm crazy. My heart must have been beaten 130. And I told him, and he looked up at me. He goes, did we ever check your B12? And I was like, I don't think so, which ended up being part of the puzzle to help me with my chronic pain, because I have no B12 in my blood. Most people are tired without B12. Okay. I was not tired. And I actually even told him, I was like, the angels told me, and I called them angels. I didn't know what they were at the time, but I figured he was Jewish, but I figured angels were okay. Yeah. And I said, the angels told me to tell you I was tired. I'm not tired, but they told me to tell you that. And we'd already decided not to work together on my pain issue anymore because I didn't want any more drugs. And he goes, that's interesting. Just this morning, I had a client who had really low B12 levels, and he had some severe pain. Have we checked your B12 levels? I'm like, no. It was just astonishing, right? So that was number 1. Before I left to go to the doctor's office, I looked up Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep. I had known about them, but I didn't think I could do that. I didn't think I could take pictures of babies who were no longer alive. But I got to the thing, I filled it out, and then I got the immediate response that said, don't call us, we'll call you. This process takes 2 to 3 months. Da 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 da. Right. So I sent that email, but before I even left to go to the doctors, I went back, and all of a sudden an email popped up, and it was the president of the whole organization who said, I never do this, but I clicked on your email. I know the area coordinator where you are. I looked at your portraiture. You're in. You're great. You can start right away. So by the time I got back from the doctor, 1 and 2 had already slotted in.
Yeah. I mean, that's the tapestry. You're in the flow, girl.
Yeah,
you're
right.
In the flow.
Exactly. And I jumped out of my truck right before getting home to get to the mailbox, and somebody out of the blue, of course, this book was already on its way to me. It had to have been. But I got somebody said, I thought you might like this person named Dolores Cannon. She sent me a book that she had read already, Convoluted 3. And I'm looking at this book, and she just put a tiny note in. She said, she's teaching her method of past life regression in a few weeks. It's in Arkansas. It's not all that far from you. Maybe you want to go. I went straight home. I called up Dolores Cannon's office. I'm like, do you still have room? Yes. What's the prerequisites? Well, you just have to be in the helper profession. This was at the time. I says, what did that mean? Well, we used to take only hypnotherapists, but now, as long as you you know Reiki or whatever. I know Reiki. Well, then you're good. I'm like, okay. When is it and how much is it? It's July 11th and it's $500. My mother was living with us at the time because of some medical issues. My daughter was graduating, my son was in sports. I was the drive everyone everywhere every day mom doing my photography work at the side. And Lauren had trips, there were parties, there was prom, there was all of that, right? And after I hung up the phone with Dolores Cannon's office person, I called my daughter in. I said, Lauren, bring your calendar. Bring it into, I might want to take a quick trip this summer. And she actually laughed at me. She goes, Mom, we're booked up every single weekend till I'm in college in September. You can't do that, And I was like, just go get your calendar. And so she came back with her calendar and she's flipping through it. She goes, and this, I think, was like April. So April to September, she's like flipping through, flipping. She goes, Mom, there's only one weekend where there's nothing going on. What weekend is it? July 11th through 13th. Okay. So I'm like, it just kept going, right? And so then I look at it and I'm like, okay, $500. Lauren will watch mom. Lauren will take care of everything. And my next thought was, where am I going to get $500? Now, I knew I could get $500 from my savings account. I knew I could just do that. But whenever I did stuff like this, I tried to have it out of my photography account or whatever. There was not $500 in there. Certainly. And there was supposed to have been more with that shoot, but of course that fell through. So my very next thought was, well, where am I going to get 500? My mother walks in, right? Like past my daughter who's walking out with the calendar. She's holding a check. She says, Candy, you never take money from me. You never take money from me. I've always wanted to give you some money. I've been here so long, little German lady, right? And I'm looking at that check. She goes, please, please, please take this time, just for once, take this check. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, yes, I will take it. And it was a check for $500.
Yeah. Wow.
And then, so I just, the whole day. And then when it finally came time to drive up there, the whole drive up, they went, you're going to be the demonstration subject. You are. That's your past life regression. And I argued with that voice. I said, but there's going to be 25, 30 other people there. Who do you think you are? Doesn't matter. It's going to be you. So I show up. Everybody else shows up. Dolores has a sheet like this. She goes, now put your name on the list if you're willing to be the demonstration subject. So over the next day or so, everyone in that class, 25-ish, 30, something, I don't remember, except for 2 people didn't put their name on the list. Guess who one of the 2 people were? I did not put my name on the list because I said, if I don't put my name on the list and she still picks me, then I'm never going to discount that voice in my head ever again. And it's exactly what she did. There's like 28 people's name on that list. And she says, well, I have to do what they tell me.
Yeah. I mean, there's no explaining that tapestry because who knows what Dolores had her day leading up to that was, she was getting messaging about somebody who's not going to put her name on that list who needs this. It's incredible.
Exactly right. And you know what? I love it. You said unboxing. I'm still unboxing that experience. And here's the biggest place where it was, because I still felt, and I'm still feeling this, when she was talking to my SC, there was far more going on between her SC and my SC. And I couldn't answer some of the questions she was asking, but I knew the information was there, but I was not allowed to access it. It wasn't time. Some of that I even believe, though, was the fact that, because imagine this, imagine I'm just in this class and I say to her, while there's all these other people watching, oh yeah, you 2 are going to be working together. I mean, just imagine what that sounds like. Well, it wasn't allowed to be said at the time. That had to manifest organically, not right then, because too many people would have too much of a human, including
Right.
me, a human reaction was like, that come from? That sounds really conceited and ridiculous. And I'm not sure I want to do this work. And
Yeah.
I
Do
mean,
you
all
think you are, Candace? Special?
exactly,
Totally.
exactly.
I get it.
Exactly. Oh, I know. So that took a long time. So anyway, that's how that all worked. And I surely didn't expect to end the show that way because I feel like I've told that story a million times. But you obviously didn't hear it, so I'm
Well,
happy to have
I
shared
was
it just.
going to go to the Mandela thing and then it didn't work out, but
I know you
I know.
were. You were like,
Yeah,
maybe and then you just couldn't get there. But
I know.
you know what? They're setting up. They're in the process of choosing where they're going to go next time. And I think, and I've put in my vote for Austin, Texas.
I'll go to Austin.
I know you would. And
Yeah.
guess what? You stay tuned to what they're doing because there was half dozen or so quantum healers there, right? And a couple of us were speakers. And I mean Shane Robinson is one of the board members and he's a BQH practitioner. And they've basically already asked me to come next time. So I think you ought to be a presenter too. I think your story is so great. And I think they tend to do it all at about the same time now. I think it's that, that November time frame. They kind of like to do it then. So let's pay attention to their schedule and possibly slot that in for our 2025. It's going to be a crazy year.
It's
There's
already
still
here, Candace. It's already happening. Hey, and when you were talking just now and telling that story, did you adjust your lights and they got really bright for a second?
it's Zoom. It'll do like, I mean, depending on where my face is, it will it's like an automatic. And I've tried to turn it off and then I don't know. It automatically
It,
will adjust. If I get too close, it'll
oh yeah,
go
because
up and down.
flash a light there, and I just wondered.
Oh, yeah.
Dolores.
Maybe. You never know. You never know. Jen, I gotta go. My next one is right now.
Thank you so much.
This was so great. It was so much fun. Thank you, everyone, for hanging out with us for a while. If you're a quantum healer or a service to others practitioner of any kind, we would love to have you at quantumhealers.com. We are a guru-free community. You don't have to believe what Jen believes. You don't have to believe what I believe. You don't have to practice like she does. You don't have to practice like I do. You just have to be willing to share and support others in a community of people who want to do just the thing that you do, which is be of service to others in this brand new world that we're in. Thank you so much. Until next time. Bye, Jen.